A video of Peter Thiel on LinkedIn where Peter talked about the importance of doing something really meaningful with your life and not just being a cog in somebody else's machine. Why is doing big things important to you?
You were right, you do your research, don't you? You keep saying these things where I'm like, wait, did I do that? Oh yeah, I did, didn't I? So why is it important for me to do big things, did you say? I think humanity, for whatever reason, generally cares about doing stuff that's bigger than them or being part of something that's bigger than them. And I think in the past, the main vehicle for that would have been religion. And that is less of a vehicle these days for many people. I also think one of the reasons why people love things like sports events, because again, they come together and they become part of something bigger than they are.
Yeah.
And there's something about that really excites me when it comes to things like companies and having like this mission and purpose, where it's like you're basically building this team of people who are crazy enough to be like, yeah, fuck it, let's go try and change this thing. And even if it fails, it's hard and it's painful or whatever, it's worth it. So I think there's that part of it that just feels like the innate human part of wanting to be part of something bigger. Then there's the more selfish, egotistical side, which is just, I just want to, it sounds kind of morbid, but when I'm on my deathbed, I want to be able to look back and go, you know what, the world would be a different place if I wasn't alive and didn't try and work on these things. I think it's maybe a bit of a sense of wanting to leave something behind, where again, natural human instinct, I think for a lot of people that's about having kids. And yeah, maybe one day I'll have kids as well. But for me, the impact I have and what I leave in my wake is a big part of that as well.
I can see the truth in that because you track it on LinkedIn year by year. So every single year that you've had, you basically write the biggest achievement on your LinkedIn. You've kind of got it going back a couple of years now, don't you? So are you going to continue doing that, do you think, until you're on your deathbed, and then you can kind of see the catalogue of everything that you've achieved and shared and given to others?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Maybe I will now. Yeah, that was interesting. I've never really thought about why I've done that. I think, don't get me wrong, I think there's probably two parts to this. If I'm brutally honest, there's probably an ego part of it, right? Where I certainly, I think, when I first got into business, maybe did it for some of the wrong reasons. And I have this theory that most entrepreneurs have some kind of deep insecurity because, and they use this as their vehicle, because I think when you're constantly getting up and having to run through brick walls, to do it because you want to make money is just not a strong enough reason. And so usually there's some kind of deep-rooted thing that people have got to try and prove. And in my case, I felt like I was highly average when I was a kid. I was I wasn't super smart, but I wasn't an idiot. I wasn't super popular, but I wasn't a total reject. I wasn't really good looking, but I wasn't fugly. I was just very kind of middle of the road, and I hated it. And so when I first started my first company, there was this sense then of I'm doing something different, and I was kind of getting recognition for that. And I think it honestly put me into quite an unhealthy overdrive mode, which made me a workaholic. Now, as I've got older, that ego piece has definitely waned and sort of subsided, and now it's much more based on actually wanting to do these good things. And I think it links into this kind of a bigger point for me, which is, in business, we have this idea of the North Star metric, right? We know that how important it is to set this one guiding metric that essentially dictates all the other kind of work we do. And I often think about, if we were to have a North Star metric for our lives, what would that be? And how would that change our behaviors? And I think in the past, first it would have been survival. We've got pretty good at that now, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think our parents' generation, that would have been money, basically. And we thankfully know from enough research that that's a pretty terrible metric to strive for. I think our generation is more about happiness. I again think that's a bad metric to aim for. Lots of interesting reasons of why, particularly from Buddhist philosophies, the idea of the pursuit of happiness makes you unhappy. So for me, the best metric that I've found is actually pride. It's if I have a difficult decision, I'll often ask myself, okay, which decision would I be most proud of in a year's time or 5 years' time? Because I find what that then does is it makes me never regret my decisions, even if it was hard or it was painful in the process. And so I guess bringing this back to what you're saying about the sort of the LinkedIn side of it, I think a lot of it is to do with pride. I want to feel proud of the achievements that I'm working on.
Yeah, those achievements to be completely honest, are pretty cool, right? You've done some wild things in your life so far.
Thank you.
Okay, I think objectively saying, you've directed a promo for Skrillex. Okay, you've built multiple plant-based food brands. You've raised millions from investors. You've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Okay, what do you think is a life well lived?
I think it comes down to personal preference, but for a lot of people, stability is important for them. For me, I really want to live the kind of life where I get to experience these things that many other people don't get the fortune to experience them. And that means like pushing myself to extremes a lot of the time. So that could be in the case of obviously one's like building a company, but even say with like travel, I absolutely love travel. Yeah. And my favorite times are always when I go somewhere that very few people get to see, and it's usually because you have to go through some kind of pain to get there. So maybe it's a really long trek or hike or scuba diving into caves or whatever it is. And you get to these parts and you have this like magical, amazing moment because you're like, wow, like very few people get to experience this. And it does then lead to like quite a crazy roller coaster of a life where you have like the highest highs and the lowest lows. And it's definitely not for everyone. And I am like an adrenaline junkie and probably quite unhealthily addicted to stuff like this. Yeah. But it's just the kind of life I want to live. I really don't want to live a vanilla one.
Yeah, one life, right? Yeah. As far as we know.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it comes with a lot of downsides. Yeah. I mean, I think I had like 3 midlife crises by the age of 30. Sure. I have them every sort of 5 years or so.
Scheduled.
I have chronic insomnia. I've gone through, countless relationship failures and so on. So been in lots of debt. It has its downsides, but it's fun too.
Me, better than stability though. I agree with you. Why live life like this? I'd much rather live it like this,
But I don't know how you do it with a kid.
It's harder now.
Yeah, because you've got to, you then have to create this kind of stability and a great environment for your child. So massive respect that you're able to do the things that you do and keep a human alive. Like I can barely keep myself alive.
I could always get another job. Like if this all goes to shit, I'm going to be fine. I could always just go back and get I worked in a big corporate for 5 years. I'm sure they'd have me back or somebody else would have me. So it'd be fine. Yeah. All right. I often find that people kind of fail to live the life that they want in the way that you've described just then because they make false assumptions which stop them from like starting the things that they really want to do, if that makes sense. So, I can't start a company because of this, or I can't travel the world because of that. And it kind of reminds me of something that you posted on LinkedIn 5 years ago. You said that all error springs from flawed assumptions. If there are no assumptions, there can be no error. I'm talking like 5 years ago, so you really are going to have to work your brain back a little bit. So I'll repeat it one more time, right? Yeah. All error springs from flawed assumptions. If there are no assumptions, there can be no error. Sounds like a Yoda quote or something. Yeah.
God, I sounded so wise back then. What the fuck has happened? Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, it reminds me of 2 things instantly. So one is that I love the quote, assumptions are the mother of all fuck-ups. Like so often, and I bring people up on this all the time, whether it's people I work with or even my friends, they make these assumptions, and I'm like, but hold on, if we were to just remove that assumption, like what if it was this way, what if it was this way, and it completely changes their views on things. So I think on the whole, people make way too many assumptions, and we just don't know whether that's true.
The word assume is literally ass, you, me. If you assume you're making an ass out of you and me, like don't do it. Don't never assume because you're putting a blinkers on immediately and you don't know if you're looking at it correctly.
Yeah, so true. So the second thing is, I think generally people are very afraid of failing in some kind of way, and the best way that I've found to get around that is, and I genuinely believe this as well, this isn't just some like cheesy saying, I genuinely believe even when something bad happens, I'm grateful for it because I usually learn from it in some kind of way. So even when I've been through a brutal breakup or a business closing down or like a health issue or one of my best friends dying, all these scenarios, there is always something that you can take from it that makes you a stronger, more resilient, more interesting, more knowledgeable person. And so when you start looking at it like that, then everything becomes a lot less scary, because you're like, you know, should I do this next crazy venture? Like, yeah, of course I should, because even if it goes to shit, I'm going to gain from it. And again, it goes back to that idea of having a life of, like, you know, full of ups and downs. I don't want that stable, plain vanilla one. And like, if I don't push myself to take these risks, I'm never going to learn to be able to push myself to these new boundaries.
Have you seen Suits, the TV series?
Yeah.
There's a great line where Harvey Specter, the main guy, right? He goes like, "Life is this. I like this."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So true.
Yeah. I'm also, again, I'm conscious I'm probably coming across incredibly corny here, but I loved this quote as well that Steve Jobs said once, which is, if you look at the world around you, it's built by people no smarter than you.
You can push things.
Yeah. So if you want to change it, then change it. Yeah. And you know, I really don't think I'm the smartest in the room, but I'm not an idiot. And so actually, I find, you know, if you put your mind to something, generally you can try and change it.
Yeah.
It reminds me as well, actually, of when I started Peg. So I had 2 co-founders in it, and both incredibly intelligent, inspirational, interesting, lovely people. And Alex, one of them, he said when we started it, I don't think it's that hard to be the best in the world at something. And I remember thinking at the time, God, that's fucking arrogant. Like, yeah, it is. But actually, like 6 years later, I really understood what he meant, because it wasn't like, yeah, if you want to be the best footballer in the world or something, that's going to be pretty fucking hard. Yeah. But the point is, like, most things, people give up on too early. And so, you know, you take something like influencer marketing, like we stuck at it for long enough, and we did arguably become, you know, one of the best in the world at it. So